Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of property management, career progression, and the personal growth with one of the industry's most inspiring figures. I'm your host, Jodie Fraser, and today we're talking about Helen's incredible journey and invaluable insights. Helen Roberts brings over 25 years of experience in the property industry, serving as the Director of Client Services for Fexco Property, where she oversees business development for renowned companies like Remus, Crabtree, Bellharbour, and IPM. As the Welsh Doyenne ambassador, Helen is a passionate advocate for women in the workplace and a champion for career progression. Her accolades include being named as PMR Influencer, shortlisted as Business Development Manager of the Year, and receiving 2 annual awards for Mentor of the Year. Helen is also eagerly awaiting the announcement for Inspiring Women in Property, where she's been shortlisted for Woman of the Year. And in this episode, Helen shares her remarkable story from overcoming a challenging family background and leaving school at 15 to becoming a leading figure in her field. We'll discuss the importance of family balance, her loyalty to a brand and company, and the changes she's witnessed over 15 years of dedication. And as an advocate for biodiversity net gain, Helen will also explore how managing agents must evolve their models and strengthen handovers. Helen, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, of course. So can you start by sharing your journey from, as you say, leaving school at 15 to becoming the director at Fexco?
It kind of predates me leaving school. Up until I was 8 years of age, I had 2.4 children, family, me being the child, had a really normal life, mum, dad. When I was 8, my mum and I had a car accident. And my mum was then in a coma for the next 16 years of my life. So from that moment, life as I knew it changed. The family model broke apart, resulting in me being 15 years of age, leaving home and leaving school, and kind of entering into the dark world on my own. As an adult, you look back at the whys and wherefores of how we got there, and I probably understand them a lot more as an adult now. But that being said, that's where I was. I left school at 15. I lived in the YWCA for a year at 16 years of age, and I then probably got sacked from every job I held for roughly a good 5 years, I would say. I moved to Ibiza. I lived in Ibiza for a year and lived the best life. And then I kind of came home and started taking life a little bit more seriously. Went to university as a mature student at 24. Not mature. But went to university, came out, and started my career path in property, which has led me to work for Fexco for the last 15 years.
And you haven't been sacked?
Not yet. Depends what I say in this podcast, Jodie.
No, I'm sure. I mean, what an inspiring story, though. I mean, how did living at the YWCA, obviously at such a young age as well, shape you in a way, and your sort of determination and ambition and stuff?
Do you know what? I think, bear in mind that when I entered into the YWCA, I'd been privately educated. I was somewhat middle class. Just succinctly remember, I'd never heard rap music until the moment I walked down the corridor of the YWCA. I was 16, I was petrified. And I remember thinking, if I survive this isn't going to be the life for me. And, I made the decision there and then that this wasn't going to be my life or my life moving forward, and I could make something of myself. That being said, the environment and what I went through has actually given me quite a lot as well. I never take anything for granted. I always view people for who they are and how they treat me. I never get caught up in how people present themselves or their job titles or their houses or their cars. I guess, I'm as comfortable cleaning a toilet as I am in a boardroom, and the YWCA gave me that grounding. I don't think that I would have been as strong as I am without going through that difficult period of my life, I guess.
In terms of your your mum, did she pass away after the 16 years, or
She passed away, so she was on a life support machine for the first few years. And they brought her off a life support machine, but other than just breathing for herself, she was in a complete vegetative state, and she remained that way for many, many years to come, and then died of pneumonia 16 years after the accident. So it became part of our daily life to just have that. And, you know, when you talk about it now, people always say, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But I guess I never knew any different. And again, her and that loss and knowing who she was before that, everything I do now, be it my career, be that the mum I am, the friend I am, is wholly based on what that woman was and could have given to the world. And I kind of feel like it's my mantle to do what was taken away from the world by her being removed from the world.
Yeah. Oh, Helen, honestly, you're gonna set me off. But so do you think her journey then, in a way, motivated you to set high goals for yourself, despite what had happened to you?
So, you know, I was born in 1981. Women going to work happened, but it wasn't as it is now, you know, in 2024. And in general, women were at home, or the homemakers. I remember being a young child, and my mum always bucked the trend. You know, she wore skinny jeans and blazers and heels, smoked like a trooper, swore like a sailor, always wore bright red lipstick, and said to my father that she was going to go and become an estate agent. And at that time, my dad was kind of like, whoa, you know, but you're going to go and get a job? And she kind of bucked the trend and said, no, I'm not happy just being a mum. I love being a mum, but I'm not happy just being a mum, and I don't want being a mum to define me. I'm going to go out there and make a name for myself. And she did, and she just started down that route when obviously she was taken away from us. So it's in my blood and my fire that I just want to achieve at everything, Jodie. You know, I want to be the best friend that I can be, the best mum, be on the best career path. And whether I would have always been like that, I don't know. But I definitely always look up to the sky and thank her for who I am today.
Do you know, I think you probably always had that fire and drive, because it sounds like your mum had it as well. So you probably always had that within you, but obviously losing your mum, and it's such a young age as well.
Sure.
You know,
but actually not even losing her.
I know, you know,
her being there, and you know, as a family, you go from being told on the night of the accident. I mean, I was in the car with her, and being told on the night of the accident, you know, phone everybody, she'll last an hour. And then she was still fighting 24 hours, and it's like, okay, she's still fighting. And that just moved on and on and on. And as a family, you go from 24 hours a day at the hospital to maybe a week later starting to go home to sleep, to then 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 5 hours a day, and somehow having to bring this massive change into your life and still live a life knowing that this is a permanent fixture. This isn't, you know, it isn't even a terminal illness. It's something that could go on for years and years and years, which it did.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's a couple of points there. I lost my dad when I was 23, and he was 49, and he had a brainstem hemorrhage in his sleep, obviously completely unexpected. But kind of going back to where you say, like, you look up to the sky and you think, you know, I want to be the best that I can be, because, you know, your mum lost her life so young. I completely get that, because I feel that way, you know, for my dad. But then also my grandmother's just passed away, for she had dementia for 10 years. And that slow death, I suppose, was also horrific to watch. And, you know, it is a complete change in your life when my nan passed away recently, to kind of think that for the last 10 years, every decision that I've made and my mum has made has been based around her and her care. So yeah, I completely understand. I mean, obviously not as it's not the same situation, but
Yeah.
I completely get where you're coming from. But moving on to your own family then, what role ultimately does family play in your life, and maintaining the the work-life balance?
That good old work-life balance. Strangely, I never actually wanted children. I never had strong feelings either
Mm.
way. And I didn't meet my husband until I was maybe 35. And it was only when I met him, and maybe I guess I found true love, that it became important to me. And we unfortunately lost a baby before we had our daughter. And I'd just been made associate director when I got pregnant. Fexco had just bought Remus, so they'd flown in, identified me, I guess, as a star of the future, promoted me to associate director, and then I kind of went, "Hi, I'm pregnant," and so it was a bit of a challenging time because I'd kind of just started to make real inroads in my career into the senior leadership world. And then I went off to have a baby. And while I was pregnant, I was worried that I didn't know who I was going to be when I came back, because you hear all these stories about women who do change, and to be honest with you, I would have been comfortable either way, Jodie. If I would have come out a jam making, knitting, embroidering woman, fine. But I didn't know whether I would still be as ambitious as I was. And I came back more ambitious, more dedicated to my career, wanting, because I now have this other person that I'm passing the mantle on, that I want to do everything I can to show her that there is no glass ceiling, and people who don't finish school, people who live in hostels, people from all walks of life can still kick ass in this industry. We don't all have to be born with a silver spoon in our mouth or go to the best universities, or we can all do what we want to do, no matter when people tell you. I mean, when I was in high school, I remember my teacher making me stand up in front of the class and saying, there are 3 types of people in the world: spitters, swearers, and smokers. And you, my girl, are all 3. And that carries through, and I think about it regularly. But then, of course, when you're trying to navigate that, so I've got a national job. I'm the head of business development for the 4 brands that sit within Fexco. So I'm away a lot. I'm up and down the country a lot. I guess my key is the most dedicated and supportive husband that you could possibly have. He doesn't work in the corporate environment. I guess it's hard for him to understand how the corporate world works. But yeah, key to me is his support and his dedication, because his family lives 5 hours away and I don't have any family. It is just the 3 of us in our unit. So, when I'm away or there's something going on, it is down to him to kind of do daddy daycare. And I guess working for a company that allows me to say no is really important. They understand me and they respect me enough that if I say, I've already been away twice this month, I'm not going to be able to do that, they respect my decision and they allow me to put my home life before my work life.
That's brilliant. It it takes a village, doesn't it, at times, and your village is your employers as well as your family
Absolutely.
unit. So it's great to hear. But you're also the Welsh Doyenne ambassador.
I am.
So what message do you hope to convey to women in our workplace?
I mean, particularly in our industry, as has been said a million times on your podcast and other industry events, we are, or used to be, I would say, a male-dominated environment. So women in the workplace, for me, is incredibly important, because we need to show these fellas that we can also do this job. And in fact, with our multitasking skills, we can do it better. I mean, all jokes aside, when I was a more junior member of staff, and even now, particularly when I'm talking about technical issues, I still find that if a man gives his opinion on a technical issue, I still find that my interior tells me, oh, he probably knows more than me. He probably knows more than me. And I don't know what to do or how to get that out of me. But I do know that if I heard one of my other female colleagues portraying that thought, I would come down on them like a ton of bricks. But by showing them their value, I think it's not only women in the workplace for me, it's more the younger people that are coming through the realms. And I take great satisfaction from bringing people through the ranks, but not necessarily on the set path. I mean, for me, it's about identifying where people's skill sets are and where their strengths are. And in property management, particularly, looking to see if you can use their skill sets elsewhere. And if you've got a strong member of staff that's trying to come through the ranks, but is struggling with confrontation or, the high element of compliance, looking to see where we can use them elsewhere in the business without losing that member of staff.
Well, I think that's really important. Everybody is different and everybody does have different skill sets. And I think I've said this on another podcast that, every block of flats is different, every lease is different, every leaseholder is different, and you need to think about it in the same way for your team as well. Yeah. But so you were also named PMR Influencer. What did that mean to you about being named an influencer, and has it impacted your career in any way?
It definitely inflated my ego. And sometimes, because I'm from Cardiff and I'm Cardiff based and work remotely, sometimes it can be difficult for people to establish themselves that are outside of London. Yeah. And I feel that so much of the kudos and, the good, shiny stuff is all very London centric. To try and make a name for myself in London and in the industry from little old Wales, and then to start getting recognised on platforms like the PMR and the News on the Block Awards and stuff like that, you just sit back and you think, yeah, I'm playing with the big dogs now, and it's that daily imposter syndrome that you have, which I'm sure you have as well.
I do, yeah.
Accolades such as Influencer and Business Development Manager of the Year, they're just that little fact check that makes you think, do you know what? Actually, yeah, I am doing this and I'm bloody good at it.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard, to constantly have, constantly telling yourself that. Yeah. And especially in our industry, when sometimes you don't even want to open your laptop to look at emails, or something else has gone wrong, and it's a really tricky industry, as you know. So to get these awards and that sort of thing, and to have that recognition, I think it's really, really important. But in terms of being a mentor, would you give advice to other mentors about how they mentor, for example?
Absolutely not. I mean, I have probably a very different way of doing things than other people, but it has consistently been shown through my career path and staff surveys and company surveys and staff retention rates. Whatever I do and however I do it seems to be working. I mean, one of, I guess, my proudest stories, my mobilisation manager, who heads up my mobilisation team, she walked through our office door 6 years ago, a really timid, shy, scared of her own shadow girl that worked in lettings. Incredibly methodical. Her attention to detail was fantastic. She was organised. She was IT literate beyond anything I could have ever accomplished. She was the first person in Wales to pass her IRPM apprenticeship, which I had to fight for because the IRPM apprenticeship funding was only available to people in England. Enter Helen Roberts fighting tooth and nail for Natalie and myself and Wales that this is completely unacceptable. And she passed her apprenticeship. She went through to become a property manager, hated every second of it because she's very shy, came to me and said, I can't do this anymore. And we created a role for her and she's moved up through the ranks and now she runs a full team. And I recently overheard her on a call, and she was so assertive and so ball-breakingly accurate in the information that she was giving, with unashamedly taking control of it. I just kind of overheard that call and just thought, yeah, my work here is done, because it's about giving people the tools they need, but not impressing on them who you want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's allowing them to be who they are and supporting them to be who you are. You can still be shy, you can still be awkward, you can still be all of those things, but still be a boss. So yeah, for me, mentorship is about giving the support, but allowing them to be who they are.
But I think that just cements in, what an incredible person and obviously mentor and employer and everything. Very impressed.
She'll hate that I mentioned her, by the way.
Will she?
That I mentioned her, yeah.
So what is the significance then of, obviously being shortlisted for Woman of the Year is an incredible achievement. I know. So when I saw you posted that, I was like, I'm so proud. But what is the significance of it to you?
Particularly that award. So the News on the Block Awards, which I'm also up for this year and haven't been shortlisted, so I don't want to pee any of the judges off. But this award in particular, I think, is a higher accolade because it's across the board in property. In our world of leasehold and property management, we tend to circulate within the same people. And yes, that's natural, and I see why we do it. But you tend to have the same people that float the boards, and, they're the same voices that you hear. To be shortlisted for Woman of the Year in the IWIP, for me, was just, I cried. I did cry, because it just felt that it was that step above the pigeonhole of the industry that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that even greater step into, hang on a minute, well, just shit. Just shit. This is
Amazing.
bonkers.
Yeah.
This is bonkers. And also, I need to buy a new dress.
Of course, you just buy a new dress for every awards ceremony. It has to be done. Do you think that your loyalty to one single company for the past 15 years, do you think that's benefited your career?
It has. Look, I'm not saying that my way of doing things is right or wrong. Years ago, chopping and changing was, of course, completely frowned upon. In our industry, if we can get somebody to sit still for longer than a year, you're seeing that as a win, But I opened the Welsh office for Remus before it became Fexco 15 years ago, was the regional manager for years, and then worked my way up. And I think that even through a buyout and a change of senior board, just sitting still, just sit still, and allowed me to hone my own skills and my own knowledge without having to constantly work on, well, how do you do this and how do you do that and what's the culture here and how do I need to change myself to be in this situation. I've just sat still, Jodie, and become what I hope is a really good business development manager. And I've allowed things to move around me. And I think that then when you start looking at work-life balance and flexibility, there is no doubt that my loyalty to a company, Fexco are amazing at support anyway. And we offer a hybrid working pattern, and, we're all for going to do the school run and, all of that stuff that you would expect from an employer these days. But my loyalty, I feel, has given me the extra confidence within myself I sat at our company conference today and on Friday and spoke to, I think there was 283 people there. When I started, I think there were 70 of us. To sit back and to be part of that movement and to know that you've made that change with the company around you, for me is intrinsically great, for want of a better word.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think you can share then some changes that you've observed in the industry during your 15 years?
Oh my God. I mean, let's start with technology.
Well, yeah.
You know, as a property manager, you would go out to do your site inspections with, we used to print off a site inspection report, and it would be, depending on how big the development was, you'd be in the rain with your pen and your paper. This is before smartphones, so you couldn't even, we had a camera. We had a camera that you shared around the office, and somebody would have to replace the batteries in the camera. And, you know, you do your site inspections in the rain on paper. So, of course, technology has moved us so far. But even if we fast forward to the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen more changes in the industry in the last 2 or 3 years than I have done 25 years. You know, prior to now, yes, it was technology and buildings are different, but it is really a different game now. And what we look for in our staff and the abilities and the knowledge that we're asking these people to have is a completely different level. But I think managing agents have to look at their own model and look at what we're offering as a service provider anyway. I mean, you know, Fexco have about a 70-30 split with estates. To, as a managing agent, be looking at you being the stewards of the open spaces in perpetuity. So, you know, looking at your community engagement and your placemaking, and realizing that you are the facilitator for all of the good things that these spaces can be used for. And I think a lot of managing agents are still in that old mindset that, you know, we check the lease, we make sure the covenants within the lease are done, we check that the transfers of the covenants within the transfer are done, and we make sure that the open areas look good. That's not how we see ourselves. We see ourselves as a slightly different level of management with an offering that other people aren't giving.
I mentioned it when I introduced you about biodiversity net gain. Can you explain for our listeners, you know, what that is and why you believe managing agents need to adapt their models?
So biodiversity net gain for any managing agent, where the Building Safety Act were the 3 keywords for the last kind of 2 years. Biodiversity net gain, if that's not on your top 5 list of things you need to be looking at now, you need to definitely add it to your agenda for 2025. So from earlier this year in England, not yet in Wales, it became law that any development on the land, not just house building, commercial, but any development on the land, the habitat had to increase by a minimum of 10% post-build to what it was previously. But where managing agents come into that, particularly on the RMC model, is this 10% gain to maintain the gain, for a key word. This is in for a 30-year period. So as a managing agent that's instructed initially by a developer and then by the RMC, you have to ensure that the gain is monitored, maintained for the next 30 years, or you start to enter into a whole heap of liability issues. Who is that liability with? Is it with the RMC? Is it with you as an agent for the RMC for not doing what you need to do? And of course, it also starts to go into the realms that if you're looking at the biodiversity gains that have been put in place, be they off-site or on-site, a managing agent is often the last person on the list in the journey from planning through to deliverance.
Yeah.
We are heavily involved with a group called Future Homes that are signed up by most of the major house builders in the UK to look at the journey and how this can be strengthened across the UK. But as a managing agent, we really look for that early engagement piece, because some of the decisions that will be made on the biodiversity net gain journey will be made by ecologists and people behind a desk that have absolutely zero experience of managing developments. For instance, we are taking on a site in a place that I won't name by a house builder that I definitely will not name, but we have to bring a horse onto the development for 2 months of the year to achieve a certain grassland, which gives you X amount of points on the BNG metric. Had I been involved in that early conversation, I would have told you that that is absolutely ridiculous, financially not viable, operationally not viable. So we as a managing agent are looking to really be involved as an early engagement and consultant piece in the early days of BNG. But even if you're not looking to consult on an early engagement piece, as a managing agent, you really need to understand the whole BNG framework and how it's going to affect you, because you'll start to look at reserve funds for biodiversity net gain. You need to look at the technical levels within your internal team, because, for instance, a area can be planted. You will take that handover and it will look fine. If the soil quality wasn't right when the planting went in, that area can die off in 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So from a BNG perspective, you're still maintaining the BNG for 30 years. If you haven't got that piece right at the early stages to check that the soil qualities were right, or that the right planting went in, or you haven't checked it correctly, you could be failing without it being your fault. There's a lot of complexities and a lot of technicalities to it that don't currently sit with any current managing agent. So we've had to diversify our internal model to include horticulturalists and ecologists, and really upend our whole business in terms of how we approach property management.
Obviously it's on our radar in terms of sustainability and that sort of thing, all environmental stuff, but it's just not something that, certainly as part of like a handover process when you move an agent to agent. Obviously that needs to be included now, but how can the handover process be strengthened, do you think, within our industry?
So even before BNG came on board, we as a company looked at what our property managers were being made to do, asked to do, where our failings were, why we were getting staff turnover issues. It became apparent that we were asking our property managers to, as educated in fire compartmentation, but then also, can you identify the Japanese knotweed on that estate there, with a whole heap of things in between. So we started to split the business into blocks and estates and train our property managers in either blocks or estates, because they are completely different skill sets. And then as that naturally started to grow, we started looking at our handovers, and we quickly realized, I think, that when you're approaching a handover, years ago when I used to do a handover, you'd walk around a development and kind of look left to right and go, yeah, it's fine. And you would just take this development on. And as many other companies have identified, mobilization and getting the mobilization piece correct not only is the right and correct way to do it, but if you get the mobilization piece right, your job moving forward on paper is a dream, because you're just getting everything set up correctly, getting the right people in to do the right job. So to top that off, we looked at bringing the right people in to do the handovers. We developed a green space team, and they are led by horticulturalists, not property managers. So when we come to a pre-handover stage for estates, these horticulturalists will lead the handover discussions. So we will go to task with the developer about the type of planting they've used, or the fact that that is missing, and you've said that this was going to be here. Luckily we're a large enough company that we can allow ourselves that flexibility in saying this site is not ready. I do feel for smaller agents that maybe might not have the security of numbers to be able to do that. But we have definitely completely changed the way we do handovers to a completely different model in just kind of 2 years, really.
That's really interesting to hear. I mean, what about, if you took over a development from another, so not from the developer itself, say you took over a development like you've explained
Yeah.
from a smaller agent who might not have, as you say, the skill set potentially, but also the manpower in a way,
Yeah.
woman power.
Yeah.
And how do you approach that? Do you know, because it can be quite tricky, I think, because you don't know what you don't know at the end of the day. If the developer hasn't told the agent, then that agent can't necessarily do what they need to do if they don't know about it. But then obviously you guys could potentially be coming in, how do you manage that?
For a start, you charge a good mobilisation fee. And I think, this was picked up on one of your recent podcasts, that we're so scared as an industry to say, no, 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 I'm the professional in this. And actually, because I'm the professional in this, I'm going to charge you for it. So with previously managed developments, it's all about going in and being completely transparent. Also saying, if we were to take this development on, particularly because you don't get the finances until afterwards, if you're not an RMC board that has collated the information yourself, you can only carry out a certain level of due diligence to that previously managed transfer. So it's about being transparent with the client that if I don't have this information, I will be needing an expenditure approval to source this information, and kind of saying that it might have been done like this in that way. But if we are to come on board, I will be employing a surveyor or a building condition report or whatever. How BNG is going to come into previously managed estate handovers, maybe that's for a podcast on a later date when I find out the answer. But it does add that level of intricacy into it, because, I'm going to Westminster to meet with the government in a few weeks about BNG and how BNG is enforced with house builders. And actually, as an industry, what we don't want is that 30-year period, meaning that RMCs are going to be tied into their managing agent because they've started a process or they're doing the monitoring or the surveying. So we're early days in the big change to legislation, and I'm not sure that all parties know where it's going, as we tend to do in this industry.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Try it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's been a bit like that for the last 7 years, hasn't
For
it?
sure, yeah.
With building safety and stuff. But
exactly.
So talk to me about your biggest challenges that you faced in our industry, but and how did you overcome them?
Every day is a challenge, Jodie.
Well, yeah, it is.
For me, I mean, I once had a structural collapse in a building at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was notified it via somebody saying, turn the BBC News on.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Challenges like that, haven't got a problem with. I just seem to, there's something in me that thrives in stressful situations. I can just turn a button on and I can just manage stuff. My day-to-day challenges come more from really little things and me losing my temper over the little things that probably don't matter. But big challenges, I don't seem to get challenged by them. I don't know. I mean, that's probably not the best answer for you, but I just don't get challenged by the big stuff. It's, if my emails won't load, or there's traffic on the M4, or it's the small stuff that I sweat, but I seem to be able to jump into gear on the big challenges.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that. Like I had to deal with a flooded, the storm we had like at the beginning of sort of the end of last week into the weekend, and 2 flats flooded, the basement flooded. Well, I've never seen anything like it, to be fair. And when the letting agent rang and said it was one of the flats was uninhabitable, so I said, can you send me as much information as you can? and we'll get somebody out. I was not expecting it to be a river in the
Yeah.
flat,
Yeah.
foot deep of water. And you're right, it's just like you flip a
You just
switch and
go.
you just do it. And then afterwards I was a bit like, that's when I started stressing about little things. But in the moment, I just kind of got on with it and dealt with it and did whatever I needed to do to sort it out. So I completely get where you're coming from with that.
Do you know what I do find challenging is, because what's always made me good at my job is that I genuinely care. And that, whether that was when I was a property manager, a regional manager, or now in my business development work, I genuinely do care. And I find it challenging when you're trying to navigate multi-stakeholder situations. You sit there wanting to navigate your way and make everybody as happy as possible. But there are 10 different answers to the question dependent on which seat you're in and who, and I find that constant reporting to various different people, it's that same old adage, everybody else has one line manager, we have 3,000 line managers. I do find that challenging because I don't want people to be unhappy, but I also wish people were more educated into the model that they've bought.
Completely agree with that.
Like, that's probably my biggest pet peeve, that people just don't understand. I mean, I had actually a query this morning of a gentleman that I spoke to about going RTM for 45 minutes, have a long call with him, come off the call, do my research. Hang on a minute. There's an RMC at this building. Why are you going RTM? And, it's that there is no other industry where people can buy into the industry, okay, by default, because they've purchased a property, that there are all these layers of complexity and law and regulation and best practice. We're asking these people to be part of that model, but they haven't got a clue what they've bought into. More so on estates than flats, because flats are more visible and the lease is clearer depending on what year it was written. But do you see what I mean? That's challenging, working in an environment where people don't understand what you do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think I've again said it on a previous podcast where, there needs to be a collective approach to educating people on what they're buying, starting from the estate agent, starting from the developer, and because by the time it gets to us, it's it's pretty much the deal is done.
Sure.
So I completely agree with you on that. But so tell me, how do you define success?
I mean, I like nice shoes.
Me too.
Look, success at different times means different things for me. I sat at my daughter's first nativity and heard her sing terribly, but looking cute. Did I feel successful? I felt more successful than I've ever felt in my whole entire life. Do I leave a large and complex pitch in London that's worth £1 million? Do I feel successful? Yes, I feel successful. Did I look around the company day last week and see people smiling? I also felt successful. So for me, it's not something that I can really define. It's all things. But I think if I can go to bed at night knowing that I've done the best job that I can do in whatever I was doing that day, home, work, friend, foe, if I can know that I've just done the best that I can do, hey, that's all I can ask of myself, because who knows what I'm going to want in 5 years. I'm not the type of person, if your next question was, where do you want to be in 5 years? I have no idea, Jodie. I know what my diary looks like for this week.
Yeah. That's kind of how you have to roll in this job, isn't it? In a way.
And that's, I know what my business targets are and my outline plan. I'm very focused on what makes me happy now, what makes me a success now. Doing this podcast with you makes me feel successful.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to have you. as we finish off, if you could give one piece of advice to young Helen, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Eat the cake, drink the wine, sleep less, enjoy more.
I love that. Thank you so much. If people want to find you, how can they do so?
They can find me at helen.roberts@fexcopropertyservices.co.uk or LinkedIn on Helen Roberts, and I will reach out to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and it's great to just sit and chat to you. So thanks you.
Jodie.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.